The eerie brightness of the full moon illuminates a dark and mysterious town, fully decorated with crosses. Outside, a dog snarls, as if feeling something sinister is about to happen. Suddenly, the steel crosses bend and twist on their own, as if being crushed by an unknown hand. Lights from the lamp posts dimmed one after another, as a carriage drawn by black horses with fiery red eyes races on the street, sending icy chills wherever it passes. A beautiful girl lies wide awake on her bed, and for good reason. The approaching evil has come to get her. An unseen power opens her window, withering the flowers and breaking the mirror in an instant. The bat-like entity gushes in with the wind and rushes towards the girl, causing her to lose consciousness. And just like that, the girl floats in the air, as if carried away by an unholy, invisible being. In the distant future, vampires rule the night, but their numbers are dwindling. With huge bounties on their heads, a class of hunters has emerged. Bounty hunters. One hunter is unlike all the others. He is a Dunpeel, a half-human, half-vampire. At war with himself, feared by all, tortured and alone, he is Vampire Hunter D. Cloaked in mystery and riding on a black steed, D approaches a church ruin where armed men are standing by, ready to shoot him when necessary. Alan Elborn welcomes him and tells him how his sister Charlotte was taken by a vampire, and how the search party of 50 men he formed to find her was ambushed. Alan offers a down payment and a remaining $10 million prize money for anyone who succeeds in getting Charlotte back. In desperation, he even hired the Marcus brothers to do the same job. However, Dee thinks it may already be too late to save his sister, infuriating Alan. Alan's father apologizes for his son's behavior and requests Dee to end his daughter's life without suffering, in case she's already been turned. He even offers to double the prize money to get the job done. Only then did the vampire hunter agree to do the task. The Marcus brothers come to town, asking if a carriage drawn by 4 horses was seen, only to find out that the place is already overrun with vampires, ready to attack them from all directions. The vehicle shines crosses of light on the vampires, blinding them as they make their escape. Clutches of vampires come after them, and when the road gets blocked by a fallen post, they have no choice but to get out and fight the bloodsuckers. Armed with a rain of arrows, cross-shaped blades, a gun, and a huge mallet, the Marcus siblings begin the bloodbath, killing a great number of vampires, and making even the undead run in fear. Suddenly, the archer hears a faint sound and shoots an arrow to where it is coming from. The light of the full moon reveals the target, a rider who catches the arrow with his bare hand and breaks it into 2. The archer applauds, introduces himself, and asks the mysterious man his name. The man replies, D, and runs off into the night, his steed and cloak silhouette dark against the brightness of the moon. Borgoff has heard of D and praised him, but the others argue that D is their competition. They're afraid that after their hard work, D gets to have the reward in the end. Layla, the only woman on the team, gets on her bike and rides away without a word, her peers calling her from behind. After a whole night's ride, Dee arrives in a place with posts topped with dragon statues. Left hand reminds him to be careful of Keat, and Dee tells it not to worry. He then puts left hand on the ground to check the tracks, in order to know how far ahead the Marcus brothers have gone before him. Dee hears a sound, and all of a sudden, a swarm of enormous creatures called sand mantas fly out from the sand blocking their path. Dee rides his steed, jumping from one sand manta to another until they get to the other side. Dee travels until he reaches a place with a stealth resting house. Once arrived, he throws pebbles into the air, and floating eyes from the structure zap the pebbles into dust. He goes on doing that until he reaches the house. He puts left hand on the stealth wall and confirms that Meyer and Charlotte are indeed in the building. Then he feels the walls around the structure to find a door. The sun is about to set, and the man inside awakens, but Dee has not found any traces of a door. Layla arrives on a bike, dodging the zapping eyes. She revs up to reach the walls and goes around it until a door on the upper portion of the structure opens, and a horse-drawn carriage comes out. Layla shoots the vampire with her bazooka, but he easily deflects it with his wing cape, sending Layla crashing to the ground, wounded. Dee follows the carriage and gets on it. He fights with Meyer, for the latter to give up the girl, but Meyer tells him that the girl consents to him taking her. When Dee is about to deliver a fatal slash in the midst of the fight, Dee hears the girl scream Meyer's name, distracting Dee and allowing Meyer to strike back, shaking Dee off from his pursuit. Dee goes back to the resting house and finds Layla on the ground bleeding. He He leaves her at first, but decides to save her in the end when she calls out for her mother. However, when she wakes up, Layla is not so appreciative of what Dee did for her. In fact, she is suspicious of him because he is a Dunpeel. Dee leaves her just in time because her teammates who are trying to find her are already approaching. Meyer thinks about what will happen when vampires have gone extinct. He wonders if anyone will mourn for them, if anyone even understands the pain they go through, especially the girl he chooses to be with, but his thoughts just drift like bats into the moonlight. The Marcus brothers follow Meyer, who they think plans to go to Barbarois, a place vampires usually go to when they are threatened. Layla keeps on thinking why Dee saved her, and Grove, guessing her thoughts about the Dunpeel, warns her about him because he is their competition after all. Layla tells Grove not to tell anyone about what happened. Finally, Meyer's fearsome carriage reaches its destination. Borgoff, Nolt, and Kyle attack Meyer's carriage, only to find out that it is just an illusion hoping to trick them out into the open. A voice mocks them about their foolishness on entering Barbarois to face invincible opponents. A cloaked phantom forms on Nolt's shadow and attacks him. Nolt warns his brothers about the shadow, but when they ask what he was talking about, he loses his life before he can even answer. The only thing they can hear is the shrill laughter echoing all around them. The menacing windmills of Barbarois greet the Dunpeel's eyes from a distance. Slithering monsters watch him as he presses on, despite Left Hand's warning. He enters Barbarois and beasts of all kinds surround him. The old man of Barbarois greets him. Dee asks the old man to stop protecting Meyer, but the old man tells him they were paid $100 million to protect the carriage, and so they will. The old man cycles around, boasting about the 5,000 years of powerful existence that have no plan of changing stripes anytime soon. He admits not having met a Dunpeel such as Dee, and he finds it pitiful that they have no choice but to end his life. Kyle, seeing Dee enter Barbarois territory earlier, wonders what he is doing inside. Borgoff and Layla, on the other hand, inject Grove with a drug that will unleash his power. Surrounded by a drove of monsters, Dee tells the old man his readiness to fight despite the unfairness of the situation considering the number he is up against. Benj, one of the foul demons protecting the carriage, mocks Dee, but the old man shuts him silent. All of a sudden, powerful blasts of light coming from afar pierce the Barbarois monsters, killing many in an instant. Grove's glowing fam, gliding through like a ghost inside the Barbarois domain, emits those rays. The carriage gallops away, but Grove's phantom emits rays of light to attack it, making Benj scream. However, since Dee is also in pursuit, the phantom stops to face the Dunpeel. Dee quickly slashes the phantom in two, resulting in Grove's real body waking up, unable to breathe. Dee chases after the carriage, but it transforms into a dark sheet that wraps around him and his steed, making them fall in a deep pit, and killing the poor horse. He tries to tear the sheet with his sword, but he loses consciousness as if trapped in the intricate web in Benji's hands. The Marcus siblings shot the carriage with a bazooka but caused no damage at all. Caroline, another Barbarois protecting the carriage, gets in the way, and Borgoff runs over her. Caroline turns into a dark fluid that enters the Marcus brothers' vehicle, and after doing so, transforms into countless spikes of solid steel, filling and piercing the whole vehicle. The Marcus siblings survive. Borgoff and Kyle get out, taunting them to fight, while Benj hides in the shadows, waiting for the right time to attack. Meanwhile, Dee summons the power of Left Hand to help him get out from the powerful illusion he is trapped in. Benj tries to stab Kyle from behind, but a rain of arrows stops him from doing so. He tries to get away, but Kyle's blades help him meet his end. After defeating Benj, the Marcus brothers wonder about the location of the carriage, but they decide to first repair their vehicle, which is in awfully bad shape. Borgoff tells Kyle and Layla to find fuel somewhere while he takes care of the repairs. Inside his coffin in the carriage, Meyer reads a letter from someone who tells him she would help him seek the pathway to the stars. Dee goes back in his journey, this time without his steed that died in the fall. Layla and Kyle, who are getting fuel for their vehicle, see him approaching from a distance. Layla tells Kyle to go without her. The latter warns her to be careful. Layla enters a pub where she encounters a sheriff asking her to surrender her gun. She warns him of a Dunpeel in town. The sheriff and his men find Dee buying a horse from an old man in town named Polk. They try to scare Dee away, pointing their guns at him. Shoving the gold coins on the ground, they order Dee to take his money and get out. However, Pulp tells them the stranger has the right to buy his horse, as long as he pays the right price. Pulp then tells them of a story long ago, when vampires were in town and kidnapped children. He recalls how a quiet vampire hunter was hired to bring back the children. He succeeded in his job, sending the children back to their parents and killing many vampires in the process. However, the townsfolk tried to kill the vampire hunter when they found out he's a Dunpeel. The sheriff refuses to hear him out, so Pulp decides to take the matter in his own hands. He grabs an enormous gun from under the table and aims it at the sheriff, telling Dee to get the horse and run. Dee thanks him, but Pulp said he should be the one thanking him because he's one of the children Dee saved from the vampires many years ago, and he always feels sorry for how the townspeople mistreated him before. Taking a rest, Caroline and her cohort wonder what's taking Benj so long, not knowing he is dead because of the Marcus brothers. A cloaked figure gets out of the carriage, and they warn her not to do so because the sun is still up, but Meyer lets Charlotte get off to soak in her much-missed sunlight. Basking in the beauty of the surroundings, where flowers and plants climb stone archways, and with fountains and flowing streams of water, Charlotte takes a walk peacefully until she meets Dee. Realizing that the girl is still unchanged, Dee asks her why she is staying with Meyer. She tells him she loves him and would rather die than be apart from him. Unexpectedly, Layla appears and tells Charlotte how stupid she is for loving a vampire, slapping her hard on the face. Then she grabs the girl and forces her to come with her. As she points a gun toward Dee, Dee readies to take out his sword and warns Layla about danger from above, but before she can do anything, Caroline uses her long hair to strangle her, lifting her up. Layla shoots Caroline but misses, and the latter throws her into the water. Caroline's ally takes Charlotte away, while Dee chases after Caroline. She melts into the trees, hiding and waiting for an opportune moment to attack. Dee suddenly feels ill because of the sun's heat, which Left Hand always warns him about. Caroline attacks Dee with wooden spikes, creating holes on walls with her attacks, which he barely manages to escape. Left Hand tells him to bury himself on the ground to survive the heat, but instead of doing so, he attacks Layla by surprise. With all his remaining strength, he swings from a vine, slashes her wood spikes, and cuts her head off, unaware that she survives despite decapitation. The carriage escapes and Layla is about to leave when she sees Dee under the shade, digging a hole in the ground. Her teammates ask if she has seen the Dunpeel, but she lies about it. She helps bury him in the ground amidst an incoming storm. After ensuring his safety, she leaves, but Caroline captures her by the leg. She spins a knife on Caroline's head, but it does not affect her at all. She is about to strike Layla, but lightning strikes the tree, finally putting an end to Caroline's life. Layla goes back to where Dee is. When he wakes up, Layla tells him her story, her mother being kidnapped by vampires, her father killed while trying to rescue her, her mother changed when she returns home, and how people stoned her mother to death because of that. That's when she meets the Marcus brothers and decides to become a vampire hunter. Sentimentality getting into her because of the pouring rain, Layla suggests a pact to Dee that if one of them dies, the other must put flowers on the other's grave, and Dee agrees to Layla's surprise. She asks him why he lives as a vampire hunter, and Dee tells her that it's because he has no right to life, being a Dunpeel. Dee and the Marcus brothers arrive in the castle, the Dunpeel's guts telling him something is terribly wrong as he goes inside. Grove warns Layla not to go, but she is determined, so Borgoff and Layla enter the castle to search for Meyer and Charlotte. All three of the hunters become victims of illusions concocted by Carmilla. Dee sees Carmilla on blood-soaked grounds, talking to him, hearing things he does not want to hear. In another part of the castle, Borgoff fought two coffins coming at him. He sees that those coffins contain Kyle and Nolt alive. He goes to them in disbelief, but his own arrows pierce him on the back, killing him. Layla sees herself as a child, mourning for her parents on a snowy night. She goes after the child and is nearly killed by a falling chandelier, if not for Dee, who comes to save her yet again. Dee tells her they are just illusions created by Carmilla, and the latter laughs, so entertained with her pranks. Borgoff comes asking Layla if she is falling for the Dunpeel, and then suddenly grabs her hostage. Layla sees vampire bite marks on Borgoff's neck and realizes what's going on. He is no longer the teammate she used to know. Suddenly, blasts of light cut off Borgoff's hand, making him move away from Layla. The blast came from Grove's phantom, who suddenly appears, grabs Borgoff, and creates a more powerful blast that kills both of them. Meanwhile, Dee runs towards Charlotte as she gets bitten by an illusion that looks like mire. Falling down, blood flows from the bite marks on her neck. As her blood continues to flow, it touches mire along the way and the vampire heals and revives. This continuous flow of blood also seeps in towards the rotten body of Carmilla and gives it life. With the resurrection of her physical body, her spirit makes its way towards Dee and confronts him about betraying his kind. All the while, power is seen to be exerted by Carmilla, and Dee is surrounded by bolts of lightning, as well as gusts of wind manifesting the tremendous power of Carmilla. She continues to attack Dee as her physical body grows in strength until it finally frees itself from the golden sword piercing it. Meanwhile, Dee forces himself to rise against her and manages to tap upon every source of his power. Through a great ball of energy exploding from within, he jumps towards Carmilla's spirit and thrusts his sharp sword at her very heart. With her spirit defeated, Carmilla's physical body tries to find a way to survive amidst the battle. She tries to escape, but the revived Mire slashes her with his winged cape. Mire then grabs Charlotte's body and with a last blow, puts an end to Carmilla. Before finally disappearing in a wisp of smoke and consumed by Dee's left hand, Carmilla asks Dee if he is the son of the vampire king. As the castle starts to crumble, Mire holds the wounded Charlotte in his arms. He begs her to come back, and when she does, she caresses his face and the two of them begin to speak tenderly to each other. Charlotte expresses her happiness for seeing Mire again and being together at last. She speaks with intense longing about Mire allowing her to dream of their trip towards the stars. Mire answers that it is not a dream and that they will go there together towards the city of the night. There, they can both be free. Meanwhile, Layla watches close by and with her hand holding her bazooka, she is ready to pull the trigger at any moment. When Mire finally picks up Charlotte and was just about to leave with her, Dee steps in to stop them, declaring he would bring Charlotte back to her loving family. Mire counters that it is he who loves her most. They begin to fight over her, matching each other in fierceness and in speed, sword and cape clashing and yielding sparks of light. Layla, on the other hand, approaches Charlotte's dead body lying on the ground. She contemplates deeply about putting an end to all the death and the misery around her. Having enough of such sorrows, she takes the ring from Charlotte's finger and throws it to the two who are still in a fiery battle against each other. Dee gains the upper hand, but instead of thrusting his sword right into Mire's heart, he seems to intentionally miss and merely wounds him without killing him. Mire then asks why Dee missed. Taking the ring, Dee declares that it was enough proof to be taken back to Charlotte's father. While the castle continues to fall into ruins, Mire carries Charlotte and tries to escape from all the devastation around them. Meanwhile, outside the castle, Dee is seen to have mounted upon his horse, and Layla asks him if he could take her along for a ride to the next town. Before they finally leave, however, Layla looks back. She sees the ship carrying Mire and Charlotte rising from the crumbling castle and asks Dee where the two are going. He answers that they are going away from where they are. Layla starts to cheer for them and wishes with all of her heart for them to make it to their place of freedom. When she sees that they were able to escape safely until their ship is but a small ball of light from afar, she casts a final look of satisfaction, her emotions overflowing as tears fall from her cheeks. After a long time has passed, a funeral service is being held and attended by many people. The minister prays with words of comfort for the bereaved as the people throw a bunch of white flowers upon the grave. Among them is a little girl with blonde hair who looks very similar to Layla. After her turn to leave a flower for the departed, she notices a stranger she seems to recognize from a distance. She suddenly takes off and runs towards him. She then presents herself as Layla's granddaughter and invites Dee over to their house. Dee responds that he was merely there to keep his promise. He was also grateful that many people came, and Layla's fears of having no one to mourn for her never came true. With that, he rides off as Layla's granddaughter bids him goodbye.